So this is +4 Pinnacle Boss We Who Are One. And yes, that was a 21 million damage hit followed by his swift demise. This is something special. Hello, my fellow Stormweavers. I have been hard at work refining and tweaking my Lightning Warp, Lightning Conduit cast on crit curse based telestomp build. And how should I put this? Last time, I had about 41k tooltip DPS on my Lightning Warp. I also had about 37% crit chance. Now, I have 85,000 tooltip DPS and 43% crit chance. Still with that 300% critical damage bonus tech from working in these fine braces. This really is something special, and no, it's not because I have managed to get hold, finally, of a Dream Fragments. Even if I put on my old ring, we are still, like, 25,000 damage above, actually 35,000 damage above what I was doing last time. So this really is quite special. Now then, the raw base of this build is very similar to last time, and I don't want to waste your time by explaining every single little detail, well, the same a second time. So if this is your first time seeing this build and all it does, then I have linked down the original setup that goes over everything in extreme detail down below. What I want to do today is really focus on the changes, upgrades, and little alterations that I have made to squeeze out the amount of damage I have done, which primarily is geared towards turning this into a ungodly boss deleting powerhouse. And you've seen that with the 21 million hit on tier 4 We Who Are One. And this can still get a lot better. My gear can still get a lot better. I can still get a lot more mana. And I have every confidence with a few more divine orbs, I would just be straight up fully one-shotting him. Like I did to tier 2 Arbiter of Flame here. Second he arrives. Oh, okay, 10 million damage hit. And he is dead. This really is quite fun, and you will notice that during these boss clips I don't have any energy shield. That's because it's not using the Azure Gaze amulet and we're going all in on damage. The reason we're doing that is simply because when a boss is dead, it can't kill you, and most of the bosses that matter in this game, you can stand there, wait for them to become active, and then as soon as they're active, one-shot them. So you don't actually really need much survivability in that case. So we have tuned everything into this perfect cast on crit warp one-shot. Our crit chance is so high and our crit damage is so potent that the second the boss is damageable, a couple lightning warps onto a couple ball lightnings, you trigger that cast on crit, the lightning conduit comes down and disintegrates it. It is reliable, it is potent, and it's not like you're not tanky even if you have to take a hit, because you're still using mind over matter. You still have a huge mana pool to absorb damage alongside ridiculous mana regen to immediately, air quotes, heal that damage. So that's really, really cool. What else is really cool is because we no longer use Grim Feast, as we don't have any barrier to actually work with it, we now are upgrading Blasphemy to use 2 curses. Both Temporal Change to slow every enemy near you, but now Enfeeble to make every enemy near you do less damage, which actually makes this even tankier. Using Whispers of Doom to make this happen, and because it's in an aura, the activation delay and all of that stuff doesn't actually do anything, which is just great. So to kind of put everything together in a nutshell here, it works as follows. We want to be hitting bosses with a lightning conduit that does as much damage as possible, and we achieve that in 2 ways. The first is by having as much shock on the boss boss as possible via shock magnitude, like the overcharged support on your Lightning Warp. The Lightning Warp, which puts the shocked ground onto the ground, guarantees that every boss, as soon as it activates, gets 2 stacks of it, because of Strike Twice from our ascendancy. The Lightning Warp and the shocked ground also applies lightning exposure, and that's increased even more to amplify our damage further. We then, of course, want it to ideally crit, which is why we have gone all in on crit chance, using supports like Inevitable Critical, and just having a load of crit from things like our Wand Affix and our passive skill tree. Reaching 43% on Lightning Warp is really, really good, but we don't just want it to do 100% usual critical damage bonus. No, we tech in these fine braces to make them do 300% more damage on the crit. So you're multiplying it up from the shock, you're multiplying it up from the crit, and you're making the crit really likely. The last little cherry on top is because we're so in on crit, we only need to use Cast on Crit. Cast on Shock is superfluous, which saves on Spirit. Cast on Crit with this level of crit chance is incredibly reliable, and it goes off near instantly and constantly, and this means that the most potent lightning conduits we can produce just keep striking. And then we manage to work in the defensives of double curse auras that keep us alive. The spirit fueling it comes from the tech of a scepter that has very specifically malice on it, which gives us even more critical strike chance. On top of the usual mana stacking, archmage shenanigans, chaos inoculation, mind over matter, and extreme mana regen for survivability, it all comes together to be something truly magnificent. However, all of this said, I want to give a big warning here because I don't want to lead any of you accidentally down a path that kind of cripples you and gets you killed and stuff, because bottom line, this version of the build going full, glass cannon-y, though you are still, tanky with the double curse and the huge mind over matter mana pool, is definitely, not as tanky as obviously having Azure Gaze on and having an energy shield. The gain is being able to use a regular amulet, and we get things like an extra 3 levels of Lightning Warp, of Lightning Conduit. We get all these lovely positive affixes that are really, really helpful. However, we lose that layer of protection. So essentially, if you have the gear and the confidence to switch to this, do so. It's incredible. But if you don't, take this as an aspirational look at what this can become, the power you can reach with this playstyle I've been pioneering for a fair amount of weeks now. Statistically speaking then, do not swap to not using this Azure Amulet until you have at least 6k mana, yes, even I'm still slightly under, or you have at least 1100 mana recovery a second. And yeah, again, I'm still slightly under. If this ring, instead of 1 to 10 lightning damage, had mana regen on it, multiplied up by my ingenuity, then I'd be about there. That's kind of how close I am. But essentially, the easiest way to tell is stand still in your hideout, hold down the lightning warp button, and if your mana is emptying, then you need a little bit more better gear in order to do this. You need to be able to cast it forever without it going down, like I can if I switch back to Everlasting Gaze. So keep that in mind. That said, though, against bosses, you really don't need to be, as I keep saying, tanky. So if you can be bothered, you can change to this build, spec to it, put in the gear, and then one-shot a boss, and then change back to do your mapping if you really want to. In any case, let's get into this then. So we'll start with your skill gems. And again, because this is just a little upgrade tweak from the core version I presented recently, that again is linked down below, I won't, really pour over everything. We have our Sigil of Power from your weapon set to staff that you want to put down on your bosses, and also you want Blink set to weapon set 2 as well. Everything else on 1, then you can swap and blink whenever you need to. We've got the Malice there from the Scepter. Have your Archmage going, and you want both lightning mastery to get it to level 21, and clarity in there too for that little extra mana regen help if you have the 10 spare spirit. In your lightning warp, you want magnified effect for bigger booms, you want magnified shock increase from overcharge for bigger shocks, you want lightning exposure so it applies it, you want that exposure to be stronger, and then finally you want inspiration so you can reach that mana requirement that much easier, and honestly without this you'll just constantly run out of mana. In Ball Lightning, you want Arcane Tempo to cast it faster, Unleash to cast more of them, Mobility to cast it without slowing down, and Scattershot to cast more of them. If I had the final link on this, I would put back in the casting it in a circle all around me for even more of them. Then we have Cast on Critical, activated of course, Lightning Conduit in there, and then we want to support it with Impetus so it goes off as much as possible, Inevitable Critical so this crits as much as it can, and then lastly amping it with Considered Casting and Elemental Focus. We have then Blasphemy, and you want to put in Temporal Chains and Enfeeble to apply both those curses, and if you have the extra spirit to put in Heightened Curse, then do so. I sadly don't, so if you have a better scepter you can, so I've kept that out for me. Everything else is just whatever you want it to be in your last 3 slots. Quality-wise, make sure that Blasphemy is at 20%, Cast on Critical at 20%, Lightning Warp at 20%, and Archmage at 20%. They are your 4 main ones that gain a lot from qualitying them up. How to play it remains very much the same. You just keep on moving forward and throwing out your ball lightnings and teleporting on top of them, and that's about it for your mapping, breaching, and all of the mob swarms. Against a boss is about to spawn, so you put down your Sigil of Power and make sure you have a few layers of shocked ground so it instantly gets shocked when it becomes attackable, and then you just again warp near it, trigger your cast on critical, and it will blow up. Skill tree then, for your ascendancy, it's the standard strike twice with Scouring Winds, and then all the delicious arcane surge support. Then for the main skill tree, this is where one of the biggest differences instantly happens, because we're just literally not using an energy shield anymore. All of these nodes are pointless, so we instead go left to pick up the extra damage. So that's what we do, starting left all the way to raw power, and then we want to head in right to cast speed and up to critical overload. The crit chance is much better for this build than the chance to shock and the lightning damage, as the shock is guaranteed and crit fuels everything that we do. The cast speed is nice to grab as well. So we want to head in to that, up to here, get your critical overload, and then up to this stat node, down and through recharge in order to get mana blessing, as it's still too valuable. 5% mana is very nice. Then we want to head right all the way around here until we end up at alternating current. The extra mana regen is phenomenal, and the magnitude of shock is everything for the lightning conduit one shot. Now is at this point that I want to mention, I of course have a lot of dexterity and I have a lot of strength nodes. The reason for that is to use the scepter I need 54 strength, and to use the gloves I need 73 dex. So make sure that you do take enough +5 to strength and +5 to dex to actually equip both items as you go through your tree. As a little trick, once you actually reach the 73 dex for your gloves, you can then undo enough of the dex to back to int, as the gloves themselves give dex. So because these give +16, I can then turn 3 of my dex nodes back to int, as the gloves themselves will keep requiring their own fulfillment so I can stay using them. In any case then, we want to head up from here on the right so we can get our royal, as the area of effect is worth so much more than the slight loss in damage. We want the warps to hit everything on screen, and then we continue up through the middle. We're initially going to go right, get through the jewel slot, and then head up to Eldritch Battery that we then take to get that huge boost in mana. Then we want to head up here for Arcane Intensity for that huge damage increase, and then we want to go up and left to this. Going left again and then down to get Whispers of Doom so we can apply the double curse, and then the jewel slot is very valuable, as is going straight up through the more lightning damage to get pure power, as we still do have a lot of intelligence. Then we go up here to get some more spell crit chance, and then finally up to get the extra 25 int. Then we're going to go on a long bit of travelling through another jewel slot to get your chaos inoculation, and then we go over here to start really building our crit chance with careful assassin. And remember, the reduced critical damage bonus doesn't actually affect us because the gloves permanently set us to 300, which is another real advantage of this. Then we continue on another jewel slot, and then finally heading into here for more lightning damage, but chiefly Wildstorm for 15% more lightning damage as opposed to increased, and more is much more potent. Then we head all the way back to this crossroads, and now we go left, grab another jewel slot on the way, and get to here. Initially, we want to go up, get yourself Mind Over Matter, get the upgrades to your Arcane Surge, and then up here for the jewel slot. We no longer want Final Barrage, as they have fixed it, so it no longer works while you are on 1 health from Chaos Inoculation, so we save some points here, and then we do want to get all 3 of these. Breaking Point for the more magnitude, then we want the elemental damage and the resistances, and then finally both the crit chance and the damage from critting is lovely here. Then we head down here. Now, I have gone and got these energy shield nodes, and the reason that I've done that is because 4% increased maximum mana is still worth it. That's still a hefty big damage bump. But also getting these small nodes are more small nodes for my Time Lost Diamond. If you don't have a 1% increased mana Time Lost Diamond, you can get away with spending these points somewhere else, but I've experimented with putting them somewhere else, and I get much more out of still taking them despite not having Energy Shield. So there we are. Then I go down to here, get the slot that the Time Lost Diamond is in, and then fill out all of this increased area of effect from reverberation and so on. Once I level up and get 1 more point, it will go back into repulsion to get that 20% more damage on your lightning warp, but until then, that's what I have sacrificed in order to add in Whispers of Doom. I am level 91, so if you do end up with 9 more points than me, you can spend them, well, wherever you want, but I would recommend getting Power Conduction once again, and then coming down here and getting some more crit chance. Jewels-wise then, ideally you want increased magnitude of shock, 20%, and increased area of effect on every single one of them. The next best 2 are critical strike chance, and then just raw spell damage. Mana regen is also fine, as is anything that just kind of generically helps, but magnitude of shock, area of effect, and critical strike chance are the best you can get from your jewels, and then also make sure you've got yourself a Time Lost Diamond with 1% mana here to give you as much extra mana as you can, if possible. Which brings us to gear. Step 1, as always, is get your 75% resist, and, well, try and keep them there. I'm struggling with that as always with the setup of my gear, but honestly, you do so much damage, and now that you're immune, if you do have Dream Fragments to Chilled and Frozen, it just doesn't matter. I've not really felt any death I've had has come because I've taken a bit too much lightning damage, but your mileage may vary, and it's still definitely recommended. Also, make sure that you do have enough intelligence to use level 20 skills. You might need to get a bit of intelligence on your gear, like I'm getting 33 from my boots, I'm getting 32 from my helmet. You might run into that problem with how much dex and strength you have to get on your tree, so it's something to keep in mind. In any case then, once that's all taken care of, well, we have the following. You want a wand with ideally plus 5 ranks to lightning spell skills and increased crit chance. Past that, your mana, your spell damage, mana regen, and cast speed are all going to do you very, very well. On your main bits of gear proper, you want as much energy shield as possible to then have it converted into mana with Eldritch Battery, and then past that, it helps with your resistances. You can get critical hit chance on your helmet. You want just raw mana coming in, and intelligence, as I said, is very, very good for you. You want to make sure you've got your scepter, and on that you can get, again, intelligence, maximum mana. You can get mana regen too. My scepter honestly could be a lot better, but that is required. Then for your amulet, which will be replacing your everlasting gaze, well, you want pretty much honestly this, anything to help with resist. You want the +3 to all spell skills, and then you want mana regen, and just generically increased damage. You want to instill it with frazzled for more magnitude of shock and mana regen, which is very, very helpful to have. Even the plus 10 strength is nice because it means I can get 10 more int on the tree while making the strength requirement for my Omen Scepter. And actually, I can undo a couple of the strength nodes. I've just noticed I'm a little bit overfulfilled from something that I was experimenting with, so that's something I can go make happen as well. In any case, that's kind of where you're at when it comes to your gear, with the ever shout-out of rare find up to at least 100%, and make sure you have 35% movement speed on your boots. I'll just hover over every piece for you so you can kind of see where I'm at. Uniques-wise then, you want to have Maligaro's Virtuosity for that critical damage bonus, and then ideally you want to have Ingenuity alongside Dream Fragments. You don't have to have these two, you can use your Midnight Rawhide Belt and a regular ring if you have to, and that's completely fine as well. Obviously, if you're wanting to be defensive again, the Everlasting Gaze comes back into play, but as it currently stands, that's what we're doing. Then, if you don't need to use your sockets for resistances, you want the 2% more mana, Zalatal Soulcore in your gear, and you want to make sure you quality everything up. Your armor for the extra energy shield it gives. In your chest specifically, you do want the 20% increased energy shield, as that translates to a lot of extra mana from Eldritch Battery, and then you want to make sure you specifically mana quality up your rings to, again, get as much mana as you can from the mana catalysts. Which then brings us to the end of this little update. Really all in on raw damage, crit lightning conduits to really blow up bosses, the double curse defensives, and just a full-on glass cannon spin to my telestomp that I am very, very happy with, and honestly think I have really got to a good place now. I hope you have enjoyed this, whether you can switch to it, whether you want to, whether you just like seeing what it can do. It's really, really been fun. For now, like you enjoyed this, subscribe and hit the bell for more. Consider supporting the future of the channel on Patreon down below, and until we meet again, a goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.